The following is an independently produced community access program. The viewpoints expressed are those of the community access producer and do not reflect those of Shaw Cable Systems. The program is presented in response to CRTC policy guidelines regulating community programming.
Hello, my name is Lucinda Dorn and I've been a glass artist for over 30 years. And today we're going to show you a little bit about fusing using Fritz & Powders and Glassline paint. We're going to be using Bullseye Fritz & Powders. They come in a large variety of colors and particle sizes. One thing really important to remember about Fritz & Powders is that they're also available in transparent and opalescent glass. You have to look very carefully on the label to know what it is. Opalescent glass always says opal. The transparent glass doesn't say transparent at opal, it just says the color it is. What I do when I'm making a project is I keep very close notes of the glass that I've used and also note if it's been a transparent or an opalescent glass, because it will really affect your outcome in the end. It's very experimental at the beginning, so do some projects. Don't worry about it too much, but keep very close notes of what you do. And then when you're completing your large piece, you'll come out very much more successful. So today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little scene. I've chosen, just drawn a very loose tree pattern with a mountain behind it, and I'm going to make something that looks very similar to our sample. Now that was a Fritz & Powders, and as I said, they come in different particle sizes. I'll show you that when I apply them. But this is Glassline paint, and it's basically a mixture of ceramic that is mixed with water. These are brand new tubes of paint. As you can see, it comes in many different colors, but today I'm going to use black just to outline my piece. Now, it's very difficult to get your glass line to run at the rate you want it to develop the kind of line that you want it to. And you can see that this is a brand new tube, so we got a lot of water coming out. So I'm going to have to mix it up. It just takes a while to prime the tube. It can be very frustrating, but eventually, once you use it for a little while, you can get the hang of it. So it looks like I have a good consistency coming out of the tube. So what I want to do is that I actually want to have a line that is a lot thinner than that's just coming out. So I'm going to use a tip. And you can buy tip sets, and they're all slightly different sizes. And you can see that tip sets come with these little pins that indicates that the tips get clogged all the time. There's always a lot of cleaning to do in between uses. So the tips just screw on to the tube, and we'll try it again, get it primed, get it working. That looks good. Now, you might be able to hear this, but it works best when you actually have contact with the glass. If you try to make your line above the glass, you can't get the same feel or accuracy. So make sure your tip is actually hitting the glass. So I'm really quite happy about how that is working. One wonderful thing about working with glass or materials like this is that you get absolutely filthy very quickly. And it's just part of it. It's a good thing. Okay, so I'm going to put my picture underneath my small drawing. I did a very loose drawing here because I just wanted to kind of indicate where I was going to use the paints. We'll start with the top of the tree. This is an old jack pine, so it can be very loose. Now it comes in different colors, but I kind of like just using the black line. You can get a lot more accurate if you spend some time. So there's my tree. And I can likely do the rest upside down. You actually have to use a fair amount of hand pressure when you're doing this. I am squeezing the bottle. It doesn't just come out on its own. When you work with glass, you do develop pretty good hand muscles. Mountains. Snow. Sky. So we have a very loose image of a tree in the mountains. Okay, when I quit using the glass line, it's really important, especially for next time, to remove the tip, to place one of the needles in the tip. This will save you a lot of aggravation next time around, and to put the lid back on. Now, if you're using the glass line and it's too thick, it's not coming out, you put a little bit of water into it and you shake it. And if you put too much water in it and it's coming out too loose, you let it evaporate for a bit. I haven't figured out how to thicken it yet, so just let it sit open for a bit. But it's an interesting material to use. It takes time and patience to get it right, but it produces a really good result. I find that it gives you a way to add a narrative to your piece, that you can actually create some scenery with a line, and that's an important part of my artwork. I like to tell a story with what I'm doing. So you noticed I just did it on a piece of clear glass so I could see my pattern underneath. But when I finish this piece, I want it to have a white background so that when I put the colors on, it will really stand out. But when I fire it, these two pieces of glass will fuse together with the color on top. Now I'm going to add some color. And I'm going to use these Fritzen powders. We have different granule sizes again, from powder to coarse to medium. But one thing about Fritzen powders is that they are glass and they are ground up fine. That means that if you breathe in this material, it will stay with you for life. In very severe cases, you could have silicosis, and that is not something that you want to happen. So when you are using Fritzen powders, you must use a mask, and you must do it in a well-ventilated area. So I'm going to put on my mask and apply the powders. Because I won't be able to talk with my mask on, I'll tell you a little bit about the tools I'm going to use. These are fine mesh screens, and you'll see that I use them to control the areas that I'm putting the powder in. This sort of technique is very loose. I'm not really worrying about getting all the colors directly in the areas. But later on in the show, I can show you how to control where to put the powders. Well, this is what I sound like with a mask on, so I'll try to explain what I've done. Again, I put my roll of tape underneath my project. That makes it easier for me to pick it up when I'm finished, when I want to place it in the kiln. With the tree, I'm going to start actually with the foreground, so I'm going to work with the green. The green I have today is a spring green opal, so it's quite a bright color. I use my little sieves, and I put a piece of paper underneath so I can collect the glass that I'm not using and put it back in the jar. So for the branch area, I'm basically going to dump the green in that area. Now this might look like a lot of glass, but really when you fire it, it goes pretty flat. So in this case, more is better.
Okay, so it's loosely in the tree area. I managed to get a little bit on the ground there. So if I want to get rid of it, I can just take a brush it off. Also with the brush, I can change it up a bit. I can create leaf-like looks in it by piling the glass a little differently. Now it's been a while since I put the glass line on, so it's nice and dry. If you do this right after the glass line is wet, you're not as successful. So I have a little bit of green left. I'll put it back in the jar, and I'm ready for my next color. So I think I'll do the rocks at the bottom. I don't have any black with me. You can get black powder, but often purple works really well in black settings. Now this is a little coarser material, so I can just use my hands. Black glass is actually made with purple. There's no such thing as black glass, but it's very, very dense purple. So I've got that, and then I'll put a little bit of green over top of it. Looks like there's a bit of grass maybe in there. You can use a percussion of your finger. If you don't feel comfortable like that, you can use an object like this. This helps you spread it evenly. Oops. It's okay, you know, if it all dumps off, you just start over. And if you don't like it, you can start over. So now I'm going to use some blue, which is a turquoise blue, in the water. I'm going to concentrate it at the bottom. Again, using a fair amount. But it's very loose. And I'm going to put some turquoise blue in the sky as well. It'll be one of those hot days in the mountains. I have another blue here. It's a true blue. You notice if I pick out right out of the jar, I'm not using the paper. It's good. Putting a little bit of true blue in the first mountain. And in the sky. Now, yellow, just a tiny bit of yellow in the sky. So it looks like I'm making this up as I'm going on along. I really am, but also experience tells you where you can and can add color, and practice. So these are red pieces. They're going to go along here. Create a bit of a shore, and down here for some flowers. So what I'll do with this piece now is take note of the materials I've used in a notebook and draw a little picture where I've used them. And if I really like the piece, then I'll be able to replicate it when I next come.
And now I'm going to show you how to make something like this plate. You'll notice that there's both glass line and frit in this plate. You can see a gold glass line and a black glass line, and also you can see kind of bold daisy design in the background. I'm going to show you how to make this daisy design. To make the daisy design, we start with a drawing, and then we're going to make a template out of simple overhead projector paper. What I'm going to do is trace the flower onto it using a permanent pen. Now, you can use a straight line for tracing, but often people have a hard time tracing. So what I suggest they do, instead of using a straight line, to use a dashed line. It just is easier and it is more accurate when you're following it. And if you're tracing something that is very intricate, then I use a dotted line, and this is good if I'm using this particular technique to make animals, horses, wolves, things like that, because the dotted line can help you get the ears and the tail looking just right. And if you can really put the dots close together, you can get it much more accurate. So this could be a very good hint for anybody tracing. Now this pattern doesn't have to be perfectly accurate, but sometimes you do want it to be. I use this pen, which is a fine tip pen. I find it's best because it's permanent. When you draw your hand over it, you don't mess up your pattern, and also it has the correct line to it. If you use a really heavy marker, it's very difficult to get a nice pattern. So there we have it. Here's all the lines, and you see actually the dotted and dashed lines are a lot more accurate. Now I'm going to cut it out with an X-Acto knife. You want a really sharp blade, and if your blade is not sharp, you can break it off, but this one's brand new, should be good. And you can see I cut it on a cutting mat, special design for this purpose. The really thing that people should remember about cutting out patterns like this is that your material can actually move and your body can move. Just like cutting glass, you've got to think about moving your body so you can get a nice even cut. And the more time you spend, the better job you do. When I cut glass, I also think about where my arm's going to end up if it's a very long cut. So I make sure my body can move to accommodate it. And if you use your whole body to cut things like this, it's a lot less fatiguing on your hands as well. I've tried different kinds of paper, so you can buy at craft stores for making templates like this, but I really found that they don't work a lot better than this simple paper, plastic. Make sure you have an X-Acto knife that's easy to hold. And as I mentioned before, the most important part is that the blade is very sharp. Oh, I'm way off the line here, but that'll be okay. Okay, so now I have these all cut out. I have to make sure that I can use the template easily. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the size a little bit smaller, just so I can pick it up and put it down easily. And it's very flimsy and floppy right now. So what I do is I take masking tape and I put them all the way around the edges. Overlap it. And what this does is that it just makes it more rigid and easier to use. Use good quality masking tape. Some masking tape just does not stick. And don't use the green stuff for painting because it doesn't stick to the plastic at all. You want it to be really nice and smooth. You don't want to have a lot of wrinkles, just so it's easier to use. Okay, it's almost ready as a template. But the next thing I do is turn the corners, just 2 corners, so I can easily pick it up and place it down when I'm ready to use it. All right, so I'm going to start with the glass line. Again, tape underneath the piece so I can pick it up easily when I'm finished. I'm going to loosely just draw the flowers, and for that I'm not going to use a tip. I'm just going to use the straight out of the container on the surface and just make flower shapes. Okay, so I've got enough paint there. So what I'm going to do is I'm not going to squeeze anymore, but I'm going to use the bottle just to mess around the rest of the paint that's there. Right? So you have a nice free-flowing flower. I'll do that again. I'm only squeezing out paint on the first initial flower. Of course, it's going to be a little stubborn. Here we go. Okay, and then after that, I'm just going to use the paint that's there. And I'm going to have to squeeze a little bit more. There. Going to go off and on. So you've created just nice organic looking pieces. This one has a few small ones here and there. So I'll put a couple of small ones just for balance. Okay. I'm going to add just a little bit of the color. This is a brand new jar. It comes sealed again, so it doesn't evaporate. Now, I'm not worried about not being messy. It just looks messy already. Oh, very messy. I'll prime it on the paper. There, we got yellow, so we'll have one yellow one too. Notice I'm holding it above, just for this one, just because I don't want it to interfere with the black that's underneath. Okay, very loose. Lid's back on. And now I have to put on my mask because I'm going to start adding the Fritz and powders.
Okay, I've decided I'm going to use some blues and turquoises and some pale yellows. I also have some chunks of glass. These are called confetti, and they're really beautiful addition. I'm just going to add sounds beautiful too. It's kind of like cooking, not baking. Now the frit is the glass line is quite wet, so it will be okay, but it might mush up a little bit. So I'm going to use very loose application. So this is going to be a blue flower. Again, lots of frit. And this one's going to be a pale yellow flower. One really important thing with the glass line is try to get some powder over top of it. Then it will be shiny. If you don't get powder on top of the glass line, it won't be shiny. The powdered glass just encapsulates it. So this is a very pale yellow, so I'm making sure that most of my glass line is covered up with just a bit. And then what I'll do is I will put on some green. This is a spring green. Just around the edge, add a little color. And then use some of these larger chunks of glass to make the flower centers by dropping it on. So that's a nice pumpkin color, and this is golden green is one of my favorite colors here. There. So we could add some more color if we wanted to. We could leave it like this as more monochromatic. After this is fired with the frits and powders on it, then it will still be flat. Because when you're firing for fusing, you fire it around 1420 degrees Fahrenheit. But if we want to get it into this shape, we then have to put it into a mold. So this is a porcelain mold. So after this is fired, it will be flat, and then it will be placed in the mold and put in the kiln again and heated to around 1220 degrees Fahrenheit. That will give it the bend. So the frits and powders have to fire much higher than the slump. So the bending is called slumping, and so we'll take 2 more firings, first to make it nice and flat and shiny, and the second to shape it into this shape. So through this show we've talked about using glass line paints and frits and powders, how to make a template, how to apply the frits and powders in a very loose manner. Thank you for watching, and join us on our next show.
The proceeding was an independently produced community access program. The viewpoints expressed are those of the community access producer and do not reflect those of Shaw Cable Systems. The program is presented in response to CRTC policy guidelines regulating community programming.